So folks, what it is, risk management, right? I was actually talking to someone a couple of days ago, and they said playing is safe is not good enough. Right? Playing is safe is just not good enough. When our aim is to achieve something big, something new, then then we must take risk, right? How do we perceive risk as? Someone might think without proper experience, taking risk is meaningless. You, I, and many other would advise us that you don't have the right experience, and if you take risk, this is simply meaningless. But let's remember one thing, that no one is born with experience. So what do we do? Not take any risk in life, right? Everyone has to work hard and take the necessary risk to make their way up. If you want to go up in an organization, you will have to take that adequate amount of risk within your threshold. It's very important. Within your threshold, it has been proved time and again that there is only one thing that remains certain. There is only one thing that remains certain, and this was actually told to me by one of my bosses long time ago. And the one thing that remains certain in our life is uncertainty. If some, if what is certain is uncertainty, why are we not willing to take more risk, right? And then I was again during my conversation on risk with this leader in the city. She said, "Life is inherently very risky, and there is only one risk that we must all avoid. We must avoid one risk at all cost. What is that one risk that we must avoid? And that risk is the risk of doing nothing. We must avoid that completely. If you don't do anything, right, you don't gain anything. So everything is a risk. Not doing anything is a risk. So it is up to us. Are we going to take some risks, or are we not going to take any risks, right? So risk management is core to every organization. Every organization. Now, hear this well. Early days in my career, my boss said, "Hemant, do you know 3 risks that every organization faces at each and every level, from the level of an individual who is part of the organization, to the level of the department to which this individual belongs, to the level of maybe a larger department or organization unit, or to the level of organization? Do you know those 3 risks that we must, as an organization, safeguard against?" Right? I was just being trained to be a leader, and those 3 risks that day, when I was told, were corruption, lack of integrity, and transparency. Do you know that these are the 3 risks that all organization leadership is safeguarding against? Corruption, lack of integrity, and lack of transparency. That's their first focus. Market risk. Not for some organizations, they are not into marketing. Regulatory risks. Maybe some organizations are not in some, they are not bound by regulations. They're outside the boundaries of regulation. Social risk. Maybe some organizations are capitalists. They don't believe in social causes, right? But 3 risks that continue to impact most organizations in the world are corruption, lack of transparency, and lack of integrity. All organization leadership around the world continues to safeguard themselves against these risks. So keep that in mind. Now, look at this. Projects deliver requirements. Maybe this is where we'll start doing some whiteboarding for us. So let's share this. So here and here. Now look, we've been saying this, but we're going to take a larger perspective today, right? We're not going to think about a project. We're going to take a larger perspective today here. And what is that larger perspective? We are here, projects. What do they deliver? They deliver requirements. And what is the risk here? If you don't deliver the requirements, stakeholders will be dissatisfied. They will not be happy. right? So keep in mind, requirements are facts. These are facts. You know this, you got to do this, right? Requirements are facts. Then when some of these PMs, when they take this journey upwards in an organization, now they don't manage one project. Some of these PMs, they start managing multiple projects: project 1, project 2, project 3, project 4, project 5, and project 6. So this one person gets promoted from a PM and becomes a program manager and starts managing these multiple projects and starts managing these multiple projects, these multiple similar projects. So program managers, they manage programs. What are programs? Programs are nothing but collection of projects. And this is the first step into leadership. So keep this in mind. Project manager is not a leader in the organization. Project management is tactical by nature. The first, you can say, the first traces of leadership in project management sphere are found when you become a program manager and you start managing multiple projects, right? And what do these programs do? Programs look projects, they deliver requirements. What do the programs do? Programs ensure that benefits are delivered. Stakeholders realize the benefits. These requirements, these products, these services are integrated well and they get consumed and benefits get delivered. Then some of these program managers, they want higher pursuit in this landscape called project management. They want higher pursuit. And what do? They take a leap upwards again and they become someone called portfolio manager. Portfolio manager. What is a portfolio manager? Portfolio manager is someone who is managing multiple programs. Imagine a program manager manages a program and it has a multiple project. Look at this portfolio manager and the kind of mix of work that they are doing. They are managing multiple programs, critical projects, and these portfolio managers are also managing operations. Imagine the level of leadership that is required at this level. But you know what is that one common thread that binds these three roles? Who are these folks who are very successful from project management to program management and from program management to portfolio management? Who are these folks? Who are these folks who are extremely successful in this journey? It is those folks who know how to manage risk, because risk is managed at the level of projects, risk is managed at the level of programs, risk must be managed at the level of portfolio, and risk must be managed at the level of operations, and risk must be managed at the level of highest level organization too. And the great thing about risk management is philosophy or underlying principle of risk management remains the same. The philosophy and the underlying principle of risk management remains the same. What does that mean? It means risks. Now, risks can be identified at any level. Within a project, if you were someone who is pursuing PMP, within a program, if you were someone who was pursuing PGMP, program management, within a portfolio, if you were someone excited about portfolio management and becoming that sort of a leader who reports to the CEO in an organization. So they are identified. So the underlying principle is risk is identified. The moment risk is identified, what do we need to do? We must perform analysis of that risk. The analysis mostly is limited to subjective analysis. Analysis, so identification of risk, must immediately lead to analysis. What kind of analysis? Subjective analysis. And in our book of project management, book of risk management, book of program management, and book of portfolio management, this subjective analysis is called qualitative analysis, based on experiences of people, experts around us. At least at that level of analysis. But sometimes when you find that the risk has capability, or the risk can be a threat to my own existence, we must perform additional analysis, which is based on some mathematical models, and it's called quantitative analysis. Keep in mind this, you identify risk right here, you identify risk, immediately perform analysis, and perform the mandatory analysis called qualitative analysis always, always, whether you're working at a project level, whether you're working at a program level, whether you're working at a portfolio level, whether you're working at the highest level in the organization as a CEO. Identification of risk, immediate analysis on it, mandatory analysis, the subjective analysis. Ask your stakeholders, what do they think? How should we treat this risk? What is the priority of this risk? We'll come to this a little bit later. And quantitative. If you find that some risks have the tendency to threaten the existence of your project, threaten the existence of your program, threaten the existence of your portfolio, threaten the existence of your organization, it is very important to perform additional analysis. During that time, you don't leave it to the perception of people and subject matter expert. You want to use some core data and mathematical model and churn out some probabilities and see whether it is worth pursuing, whether this opportunity or whether this threat is worth even looking at, right? So analysis. Once you have performed the analysis, folks, risk, you establish the priority. It helps you establish the priority. You just don't identify risk and say this risk is high priority. Only after you have performed analysis is when priority is assigned. After priority, you develop detailed responses to each of the high priority risks at a bare minimum. Why should I waste my time on something that is not going to happen? After my analysis, I had 100 risks. After my analysis, I found out that 20 were mission critical. I said, I must develop detailed responses for those, right? Detailed responses are created. And once we have the responses, now we wait. We play the waiting game. And what is the waiting game? If the risk takes place, if the risk materializes, if the risk realizes, whatever you may want to call it, take place, materialize, realize, happens, then implement the response. Implement the response. And implement the response, right? So this is risk management, and at all stages in the life cycle of a project, program, portfolio, or at any level where you manage risk, you must continue to monitor risk throughout. Reassess risk and make so look, you thought that the risk may happen next month. The next month passed and the risk did not happen. You must now reanalyze risk and maybe put it to sleep. Say, all right, guys, we will just keep it in monitor state. We don't need to worry about it. It's not going to happen. The time has elapsed. The time has passed, right? So here you go. This is what is called the life cycle of a risk within project, program, and portfolio. That's the most interesting part about risk. Wherever you will work, whatever you will do, when it comes to risk management, the philosophy is very simple. identification of risk can happen anywhere. The moment you identify risk, analyze it. And analysis will help you establish priority. Once you know the priority, prepare detailed responses. And when the risk takes place, when the risk materializes, when the risk happens, when the risk realizes, whatever you want to call it, implement the adequate response. Right? That's the philosophy of risk. And if you were writing a simple exam like PMP, this is it. If you know this, you can answer so many questions on the exam. Now, let's take a deeper look at it a little bit, right? Let's take a look at it here. Risk management. Or let's just say, what is a risk? Some of you will say, and actually all of you will say, risk is an uncertain event. It is not an event. So in the exam, whether you're writing the RMP exam or you're writing the PMP exam, sometimes they'll be like, well, risk is an event. No, wrong choice. Risk is an uncertain event or a condition. Uncertain event. So if it is uncertain, what does that mean? If it is uncertain, it means it may take place. It may take place, or it may not take place. It may take place or it may not take place. So risk is an uncertain event or condition, may take place, may not take place, but if it takes place, sometimes called if it happens, sometimes called if it realizes, sometimes called if it happens, realizes, realizes and takes place. Let's just leave it here. But if it takes place, if it happens, if it realizes, your risk will only be documented in the risk register if it impacts one or more objectives of your project, program, portfolio, or organization. So look, this is the definition of risk. Risk is an uncertain event or condition which may take place or may not take place. But if it takes place, if it happens, if it realizes, it will impact one or more objective or of your project, program, portfolio, or organization. So what does this mean? If it impacts, if it happens, then it will impact. What does that mean? This is what it means. Stakeholders will raise their hand and they will say, I have identified a risk as a project manager, as a program manager, as a portfolio manager, as an organizational leader, as a risk manager. You will just not go and document it in the risk register. Just because someone raised their hand and said, I have a risk, does not warrant that it gets dropped into the risk register. It does not mean that you will document it in the risk register or it has become a candidate. It has become a candidate to be part of your project's program, portfolio, or organization's risk register. So when does a risk become candidate for being dropped into your risk register or being part of your risk register? When it maps to a requirement, objective, or any strategic objective. So let's just say Deborah says, I have a risk. We are working on, let's say, a very simple example, program or a project or a portfolio. Deborah says, I have a risk. So what is the risk? She talks about the risk. And I think about the objective of my project. And I think about, as a leader, I think about, does it impact any of the objectives? It does not. I tell Deborah, the risk does not impact any of the objective. And this is my analogy on that. And the risk does not become part of my risk register. Why? Why am I doing this analysis? Even to drop something in my risk register, because the moment something falls into the risk register, you have to develop a response. Now, someone said, because of this reason, the project will be delayed. If someone said, because of this reason, the project will be delayed, I said, oh, my project, one of my objectives is getting impacted. It becomes, now what do I need to do? I need to bring 2 more resources. What happened? To save my schedule, what happened? 2 more resources. 2 more resources will cost me money. Every time you document a risk in the risk register, a response is developed, and response is usually playing with the schedule or the cost. Ultimately, it's the cost. So you're increasing the project cost. Every time a risk drops into your risk register, your project cost also escalates. So project managers, program managers, risk managers, portfolio managers, organization leaders have to be extremely careful about these constrained resources that we have. And if everyone said a risk, everyone cried a risk, and we documented the risk in the risk register, you know the cost of the project will probably be 4 times, because now you have to develop a response for almost everything. That is why if we go to our previous slide, we identify risks, and only those risks become part of the risk register which map to the objectives. If they don't map to the objectives, we push back. And then still we do not develop responses. What do? We conduct additional analysis. We understand the priority of the risk, and then we create detailed responses. Till the time you do not know the priority of the risk, you don't say that I will do this and I will do that and I will do, or I'll bring this and bring that, or extend the schedule, or add some cost. You don't do anything unless you got full, complete idea about what this risk is, right? Priority is extremely important. So we'll continue to take a look at each and every step till detailed responses now. So just an overview for you. Now, keep in mind one more thing. If we had to add one more thing to this mind map here, I'd say risk here. So risk definition, risk uncertain event could be negative or positive. Sometimes called, could be a threat or an opportunity. But really, gone are those days of using these words: negative risks, positive risks, threats, and opportunities. Those days are gone. What happens? Look, let's take a very simple example of a project. You are in a project. This project will start on, or started on, 30th of January 2022. This project is scheduled to end on 21st of September 2022. On 17th of Feb, one of the critical resources has gone. This resource is very niche. Finding these resources is going to take some time. And if we don't find this resource in next 7 days, this project will be delayed by 2 months, another 2 months plus. So it will be November, it will be released in November. So risk, we see a risk. One of the resources has left, a risk has taken place. Now, within 7 days, if we don't find a good resource, the same kind of a resource, the project will be extended to November, right? So now look, a project which was supposed to be delivered on 21st of September, because of some risk taking place, it will not be delivered. So risk, as much as people like to say, could be positive or negative, could be opportunity or threat. In the modern language of project management, risks are called value destroyers if it is a threat, and value enhancer if it is an opportunity. Because, you might just, so risk management is about, so what is risk management? Risk management is about, this is the most modern definition of risk management. Risk management is about creation and protection of value. This is what risk management is. Risk management is about creation and protection of value, right? We'll not let anything happen to our project, program, portfolio, or any work we are doing as a risk manager, project manager, program manager, portfolio manager. We'll not let anything happen to our project. We'll protect our risk. We'll protect the value. So the idea of risk management is, let's protect the value that our project, program, or portfolio is going to deliver. Let's ensure that we create the value that is expected from our project, program, portfolio, or any endeavor you plan on taking in an organization. So,
Question.
no questions till 8:30. Just write down your questions and then we will take some questions. So let's talk about risk management. And we're talking about risk management. It could be in the life cycle of a project. It could be in the life cycle of a program. It could be in the life cycle of a portfolio. Or it could be anywhere in the organization, right? Even operations are part of an organization. So risk management, how does it happen? So let's just say life cycle means beginning and end. We'll not say initiating and closing. We'll say beginning and end. Beginning of a program, end of a program, or closing of a program. Beginning of a project and closing of a project. Beginning of a portfolio, usually portfolios are lifetime. They continue to run, evolve, change, right? And sometimes they are stopped, but the time span and time horizon is really, really wide and long. So let's say this is the life cycle. You could say program, portfolio, or a project. Risks can emerge or can be identified anywhere throughout the life cycle of the project, program, or portfolio. They could be identified anywhere. So your risk could be identified right here when execution is taking place. And the moment risk is identified, look, the risk is at the moment, what is happening? The moment risk is identified, what do? You, step one, do not write or document it into the risk register. So what do? Map it to the objective. Map to objective. And if it maps to the objective, now document this risk in the risk in the risk register. Document the risk in the risk. Now document the risk in the risk register. And now, after documenting the risk in the risk register, there are a couple of things that happen here. While you are documenting the risk in the risk register, there are a couple of columns you fill. We'll talk about those. Now do analysis. At least at a bare minimum, perform qualitative analysis. At a bare minimum, perform qualitative, subjective analysis. And what will this analysis do? It will tell you what is the priority of the risk. You need to, from documenting risk to understanding priority, and at this time, you will develop detailed responses, right? Now, whether you're writing the risk management exam, whether you're writing the PMP exam, the program management exam, or a portfolio management exam, the process or the way risk management happens in organization is always this manner. Any organization, be it Tesla to the smallest organization on earth, they all have similar risk management framework, right? PMI did not create this risk management framework. It is part of the risk body. They have created this framework and all organizations continue to follow the same framework. So let us review this a little bit. Let's take a look at it. So what happens? Now let's see the operational aspect. Let's say we are working as a risk manager or a project manager or a program manager in the organization. Risk can be identified anywhere, but in the beginning of the project, program, or portfolio, what you do is you start a risk register. So when do you start a risk register? It should be started right in the beginning. And whatever risks that you see right now, based on some documents that are available to you, be it a program, portfolio, or a project business case, program, portfolio, or a program charter, whatever that business document is, start documenting these risks here. Risk ID. Now, one of the risks, so let's say there are 3 risks already here and now 4th risk. You are in the project. One of the stakeholders said, well, Shamit, I have a risk. I have identified a risk. Shamit maps it to the objective of the project and it maps to the objective. Says, yes, this risk needs to be part of my risk register because I need to manage it. So what does he do? He says, all 3 risks were already there. He says, risk number 4. And here you go, risk description. He says risk description is this risk may arise due to a snowstorm expected on the release date. There you go. He documents the risk here. Then the moment you identify risk and it becomes part of your risk register, what else do? You immediately, right here with this, you will say, all right, who will be the risk owner? So if this snowstorm happened, who would be the person who would at that time take care of this? If this happened, who would take care of this? And the risk owner exam question. Who is the risk owner? A responsible person who understands that business area. That the source of the risk, a person who understands, responsible owner. So risk owner, let's say, said, well, risk owner is Jack. Jack would be the risk owner. Then, look, all this is part of identification. Then, a very high level potential response is developed. High level potential response. So they said there will be a snowstorm on the week when the release is going to happen. So the potential book hotel rooms close to the office. This is what we did actually for one of our conversions which was supposed to happen on the weekend. Snowstorm in March, we said we'll be booking hotel rooms during that conversion weekend so everyone can stay around the office. Book hotel rooms, right? Some organization will say provide virtual access to people to be able to work from remotely if that happens. So potential. Now look, it is not a detailed response, but a potential response. But look, what is it? You see a risk, it maps to the objective. What is it doing? This cost was not supposed to be there before, right? There was no snowstorm expected. Now there is. So what happened? Look at this cost of the project, how it went up. That is why caution or attention must be paid to risks when a stakeholder identifies a risk. Proper mapping to objective must be done before it gets dropped here in your risk register. So now this is called exam question right here. As part of risk identification, what is it that you do? So, answer, as part of risk identification, if the risk maps to the objective, it must be documented in the risk register with information like risk ID, unique ID, risk description, risk owner, and potential response must be documented. The moment risk is identified, you must do it at a bare minimum. But this fourth risk became a candidate to be documented in the risk register only when Shamit had confirmed that this risk maps to one of the objectives. If Shamit is a project manager, is it coming from one of the requirements? It's going to impact the requirements? Yes, it should be in my risk register. If someone is a program manager, they will think at that higher level. If someone is a portfolio manager, they will think at that level. Does it impact my objectives or not? Right? So this is called as part of identification of risk. The moment risk is identified, we do. But Shamit just does not stop here. What Shamit does is he's using this template. Now he says, guys, he starts talking to some of the experts in the organization, and he says, guys, what is the category of this risk? Category of this risk, right? And look, organizations have become extremely mature in the practice of risk management. They're extremely mature, and they're using these tools. Even a risk register that I'm building in front of you is a tool. They're using these tools, which are very intuitive. You don't have to really think a lot. Right here, there is a drop box or a drop down. Just like if you're filling a form, it will say they lock you from putting any information. But if you say gender, you can only put male, female, and some other, right? Or I don't want to specify. You already have three options. Similarly, organizations with the level of maturity and amount of project programs and portfolios they have executed, they know the sources. Category means source, so category could also be source of risk, right? So what is source of risk? Source of risk could be from scope, source of risk could be schedule, source of risk could be cost, source of risk could be resource, quality, communication, procurement, stakeholder. Now look, source of risk could also be external factors like social need, political condition, depending on the kind of organization you're working on, environmental factors. So this drop down contains all these lists, and this is what is called a prompt list. Prompt lists are predetermined categories that are created for us to not think too much. We got all the information. Based on our experiences, we have created this for you. And Shamit clicks on it and says, this is more like the natural disasters or something like that, and chooses that category here. So category, he selects the category, then he says probability, high, medium, and low, and impact, high, medium, and low. He asks his stakeholders, guys, what do you think is the probability of this happening? Someone goes on Google, says, Shamit, this is 100%. Says, oh, high. It is high. Says, and what is the impact? Impact will be extremely high because we are going to miss the release date if you don't do anything about it. Impact is very high. So what does it mean? Probability high, impact high, your priority of the risk will also be high, right? Priority. And this part, guys, this portion is filled as part of mandatory analysis that must be done for each and every risk that is in your risk register. Mandatory analysis called qualitative risk assessment or analysis. So in the exam, first question, you just identified risk. What should you do? Map it to the objective. If it maps to the objective, what do you do? Document it in the risk register. Now, what is part of what is it that you do as part of documentation? You must assign it a risk ID. You must provide a risk description. You must assign a risk owner, a responsible person. You must develop a high level potential response. You're going to come and revisit it. It's called potential response. You must assign it a category, source of risk category using the prompt list. So what are prompt lists? These are predetermined categories that have been created by organization, right? When you get a risk register, it has these drop down. Similarly, even for probability also, there is a drop down which says high, medium, low. You select one. You cannot go and say a medium, high, low, medium. If the organization decides that they want to have that category, they will build it, right? And priority also, you have a drop down, and these are called prompt lists, the predetermined categories that are created to facilitate risk management, right? All organizations, they're making the work easier and easier and easier. That's why they capture something called lesson learned. So imagine Shamit is executing this project and they identified this COVID. Because of COVID. And before that, there was no category for COVID. You know how many organizations they have updated their risk register and they've added something like a pandemic now as part of their risk register category? These prompt lists, they're not something that we created 10 years ago. They are continuing to evolve based on the industry we are working on, based on the external factors that are impacting us, based on the internal factors that are impacting us. So it continues to evolve in front of us. Now look, in the exam question, as part of qualitative analysis, what is important about qualitative analysis? Must be, look, must be, not should be, not could be, not won't be, would be. Must be performed for each and every risk on your risk register. So look, if you had, let's say 5, 6, 7, 8, and 91 risks, qualitative risk assessment, sometimes called subjective analysis, must be performed for all 91 risks. So what does that mean? For all the risks that are documented in your risk register, you want to see at least this information about each and every risk. This information. You want to see this, right? So one of the famous questions on the exam has always been, what is the primary reason why qualitative risk assessment is performed? What is the primary reason? The primary reason why qualitative risk assessment is performed is because we want to understand the priority of the risk. This is what we want to understand. We want to understand, let's write it properly, priority of the risk. This is what we want to understand. We want to understand the priority of the risk, right? We want to understand the priority. Qualitative risk assessment is performed to understand the priority of the risk. And how do we understand the priority? By understanding the probability and impact, or by multiplying probability times impact. You understand the priority. High probability and high impact means high priority. So keep this in mind, guys. Qualitative risk assessment is a must. Number one, question on the exam. Number two, why do you perform it? Because you understand the priority of the risk. What else happens as part of qualitative risk assessment? Category is assigned, probability and impact is understood. Is this some mathematical calculation? No, it is very subjective in nature. And what is one of the important criteria to understand probability and impact? Data, quality of data. So when stakeholders are telling you data about based on their experience, they are providing you accurate data. because if you will take inaccurate data from your stakeholder, your probability and impact assessment will be all, it will be all, maybe not all wrong, but most of the information that you're consuming and using will be wrong and will direct you towards the wrong priority, right? So now look, you have this 91 risks and you're working on a mission critical project, and you see that some of these risks here, the top 7 risks here, the priority is high, the impact is extremely high on these risks. And this is a $100 million project. You're like, I can't pursue this project further if I don't perform these additional analysis. I want to perform some additional analysis on some of the risks where I have a big, huge exposure. You know, when, so it's like this, you got $100,000 in your account and you say that I'm going to take this you only have $100,000, you have nothing else. You say, I take this $100,000 and I'll invest it on a marijuana stock. Tomorrow that stock can become penny stock and you might be left with zero, right? So are you willing to take that risk, or would you like to perform some additional, would you like to just believe on some data that is available around you, or would you like to use some kind of a mathematical model, additional analysis? Would you like to talk to an expert who is in this field of marijuana and get them to do some analysis for you? I think I will. And that additional analysis sometimes is done on program, projects, and portfolios. And that analysis is called quantitative analysis. Quantitative analysis now right here. What does it do? Quantitative risk analysis leads to, what does quantitative risk analysis do? Let's just take the cameras off. Quantitative risk analysis leads to understanding the overall project risk. Keep this in mind. Overall project risk. It's not qualitative assessment is done on each and every risk on the risk register. Quantitative risk assessment using mathematical models leads to understanding the overall project risk, my overall exposure, right? And it tells me sometimes after doing risk assessment, I say, well, I don't want to go in this direction. Shut this project right now because it is going to cause me legal risks. I don't want to do this project because it is going to cause me market risk. I don't want to do this project because it can lead to my own bankruptcy. Why would I execute a project like that, right? The idea of risk analysis is to protect, conserve value and enhance value. That's the idea. And why would I go and deliver a requirement that is causing me grave threat and even threatening the existence, my own existence? Why would I go execute such a project? I want to shut it down. So sometimes when you find, only few times on projects, you find some requirements to be of grave risk, you will perform additional analysis called quantitative analysis. Whether you're writing the RMP exam or you're writing the PMP exam or any exam based on related to project management, quantitative risk assessment is done by niche resources. They're very niche. So when you bring these people into the project, look, every time you document risk, the cost of the project goes up. True, right? You all agree? It goes up because you have to develop a response. Imagine now you have to bring a resource who is going to charge you $3,000 an hour. Would you like to look at, would you ask these kind of resources to go take a like all 91 risks? No, I would not. We'll go bankrupt just by their analysis, right? So what would I do? I'll say, can you please take a look at top 3 risks because I feel that their impact is extremely high and they can put me in some kind of danger. Let's say, okay, top 3 risks. So what happens? Quantitative risk analysis is performed by niche resources. How do they perform risk assessment? They use mathematical models. They use models, mathematical models. But again, you have to, organizations must caution themselves. Project teams must caution themselves, program teams must caution themselves, and portfolio teams must caution themselves against this risk of using bad data, right? You go to a mortgage specialist and tell them that I'm making $10 million. They will say you are approved for $30 million. Junk in, junk out, right? Similarly, in risk management too, if data integrity is not maintained, the results and outcomes will also be poor. Decision making will also be poor. So when you're doing quantitative risk assessment, just like qualitative, you must ensure integrity of data because you're going to use mathematical models. They will take the information, churn it, and tell you the chances of success or failure, right? That's what, so from exam standpoint, for RMP or PMP, why quantitative risk assessment is performed on all the risk? No. What kind of risk? Where the is grave, right? Impact is extremely high. I want to perform additional analysis. Who performs it? Niche resources perform it. What happens to the project? The cost escalates. So be careful when you're performing this additional analysis. And what does it give you? Like qualitative risk assessment gives you the priority. This gives you the overall project risk. Keep this in mind, the overall project risk, number one. Number two, now something that you thought was number 7 on your list became number 1 because of this analysis. Reprioritization of risk take place. So exam, quantitative risk assessment using mathematical models, number 1. Number 2, quantitative risk assessment is done by niche resources. Number 3, cost of the project goes up. So don't perform this risk assessment on all the risk, only some high priority risks. Number 4, what does it do? It gives you overall project risk. And number 5, it leads to reprioritization of risk. But keep this in mind, this is not mandatory assessment, right? Only if you feel that it is necessary, then you do it. And then now, at this time, you are ready to develop the responses in a detailed fashion. So look, in risk management, you look at responses twice. One, in the early stage of identification of risk, where you document a potential high response, and at the end of your analysis, when you document a detailed response because you have more information about risk, and this is how a risk register looks like in an organization. This is how it looks like, with a column for responses, but there is some more information. But this is how most of the risk registers, and from exam standpoint, for RMP as well as PMP, you got to keep this in mind, right? This is the idea of risk management. The moment, look, a risk is given to me, I say, does it map to the objective? Yes, no. If yes, it is going to go in my risk register. Now I should immediately document 3 things: risk ID, owner, description, and a high-level response. 4 things. Let's not stop here. Let me work with my experts now that are available to me within the organization, my SMEs, my SMEs. Let me now understand the category, probability, impact, all this done to understand the priority. If I find that some of the risks can cause threat to my own existence, I must do some additional analysis. But I must caution myself and my team about what else can happen. The cost is going to escalate now. Niche resources will come. Data integrity must be maintained, and it must not be done for all the risks, only few high priority risks. Overall project risk and reprioritization of risk, quantitative assessment. And now you are in a good place to put the detailed responses related to the risks, right? If you're writing PMP, you could stop here and you could also log out now if you didn't want to stay here, because this is what you needed to know. But what we'll do is we will now create another slide, and in that slide, we will put some more details to this. So, identify risks, the moment risk identify, map to objective. if they map to objectives, any of the objectives of your project, program, portfolio, or organization, now document them in the risk register. When you document them in the risk register, make sure that you give it an ID, unique ID. Make sure that you assign a risk owner. Make sure that you responsible owner, risk owner, make sure that you also assign, you develop a very high level response along with a description. You know, risk, when you document risk, it is very important to understand. When you document risk, there is a syntax. There is a way to document risk, which is cause, description, and impact. All risks must clearly specify what is the cause, description about the risk, and what is the impact. Three things. And this is called meta language of risk writing. So when you document, so all the risks that you document in your risk register, they must start with what is the cause, what is the description, and what will be the impact of this risk. You got to document those three things about risk when you provide description of a risk. Good risk writing people, they always say cause. Because of this cause, this is the kind of risk will happen, and this is the impact of that risk. Three important things are captured, and this is called meta language. So document the risk in the risk register, and this is what is called identification of risk as part of identification. In the exam, they will say, what do you do as part of identification? I provide it an ID, I give it a risk owner, I develop a very high level potential response. High level, this may change later, and a description based on cause, risk description, the description of the risk, and impact of the risk at a very high level. You identify risk, and these are the things. If you were writing in the RMP exam, there are 6 questions around this area. And if you're writing a PMP exam, there are 2 questions around this area. Write this slide. Now comes, you've identified risk. The moment risk is identified, you immediately analyze it. And look, there is so much similarity between stakeholder management and risk management. So much similarity. Remember the risk register that we created last week. Remember it a little bit. Stakeholders can be identified anywhere. Similarly, risk can be identified anywhere. The moment you identify stakeholders, analyze it to understand the influence, the attitude, the interest, and the power of the stakeholder. The moment you identify a risk, if it maps to the objective, immediately understand the probability, impact, and category. Do analysis. So stakeholder, identify, analyze, prioritize. Risk, identify, analyze, prioritize. Key in project management. Requirements. Look, stakeholders' requirements, identify the requirements, you document them, prioritize them, analyze and prioritize them. The idea is the same. Risk management is formed on a very simple philosophy. If you identify something, don't take action. Simple, general principle of life. If you identify something, don't take action. Analyze, then take action, right? But too much analysis is paralysis. Keep that in mind too. Don't just continue to analyze, take some action, right? The dilemma of action versus inaction and inertia are the greatest causes of risk. I don't know if you knew this. The dilemma that organizations have of action versus inaction and the inertia that we feel every time stalling, life is stalling. These are the greatest causes of risk in everyone's life. So stakeholder management, risk management, and generally anything that we do in life, identification, analysis, priority. Priority tells me whether it needs my attention or not. In life and in risk management too, right? So risk can be identified anywhere, Once they get identified and if they meet the objectives, they must be documented. Once they are documented, they must be analyzed. At a bare minimum, qualitative analysis, which is mandatory, and if required, quantitative analysis, and finally, detailed responses. Detailed responses. This is what your risk management is all about. Whatever level you're working in, right? If you were interested about risk management, you'll say, well, I've done PMP, maybe I should take a look at this too, just because this is what it is. The entire subject revolves around this, right? So we talked about identifying risk. Let's also document. So identify risk, you filled in those 3-4 columns, you do qualitative assessment or analysis. Number 1, mandatory. For every identified risk, it is mandatory. Number 1. Number 2, category plus probability plus impact must be understood. Number 3, it should be very subjective based on stakeholders, subjective based on stakeholders' experiences, expert advice and all that, expert judgment, expert advice. Number 4, but stakeholders will also provide you their inputs, insight based on some data, so ensure that data quality is high. Data quality is high. Now, number 5, why do all this? Why do all this? Why do all this? I want to do all this because I want to understand the priority. This is what I understand. Qualitative assessment. If you know this, if you were writing RMP, 4 to 8 exams. If you're writing PMP, definitely 2 to 3 exams. If you just knew this. Now, the exam. What happens once you have, what happens? What happens once you have performed qualitative analysis? What happens? You can straight away go to develop responses. You do not necessarily need to do quantitative assessment if you have found no risks that impacts organization at that it has gone beyond your threshold. If there is no risk that I feel is not beyond my threshold, I like to manage it, I'll manage it, right? But if I find that risks are beyond my tolerance, my threshold, I'll perform some additional analysis of called quantitative analysis. This analysis, quantitative analysis, is done to understand the overall project risk. So qualitative risk analysis, guys, is done to understand individual project risk. Quantitative risk analysis, overall project risk, and sometimes leads to reprioritization of risk because something that you thought was not so important because of the additional analysis, new data that was found, new synchronizations that took place, it has led to reprioritization of risk, right? Is it mandatory? It is not mandatory. It is only performed. Mandatory. It is only performed if you find the risk, some of the risks are beyond the threshold established for your project. Now, what happens because of this? There's some aspects that need to be we must caution against them, and one of those is there will be costs which will escalate because of this, because you will bring in some niche resources. Not everyone can perform this level of analysis. You will bring some niche resources to perform this analysis, as they use mathematical models. In the exam, whether you're writing the RMP risk management exam or PMP exam, they will test you on 3 different models. And you would just need to speak. So what are those 3 models that they're testing you on? Number 1, simulations. Simulations, right? Simulations, or sometimes called what if scenarios. So quantitative risk assessment is done using simulations and what if scenarios. And you don't need to know what simulations are. They're also called Monte Carlo analysis. There are some graphs that we will take a look at with our RMP students, and if you want to see them, you'll be part of that class. Monte Carlo analysis. What is Monte Carlo analysis? It is about understanding the probability of success or failure. Right? So this analysis will tell you risk number 3, based on our additional analysis, the chances of this risk taking place are 99%. And the loss could be $5 million. Now the organization is sitting and thinking, almost 100% chance of losing $5 million. Why are we even delivering this requirement like this? A greatest example of such an analysis not performed is Facebook. In 2015 and 14 actually, Facebook decided to cut the slices of data and sell them. They said we got data of daily users, 3.2 billion people were daily using Facebook. So there's so much data, right? We can sell it to different companies, marketing companies, this, that, and they ended up slicing the data and selling it to what people needed, without thinking about the repercussion of countries' privacy policies. If they did this analysis, and in the project or program or portfolio that they were running, which was about selling data, public data, if they did some analysis like this, it would have said, if the regulatory body gets involved, there will be a penalty of $3.2 billion, which actually Facebook paid in 2018. In 2018 or 19, Facebook paid $3.2 billion for selling out data to companies and some Russian agencies who used and manipulated this data, and they say they manipulated the election. True or false, no one knows, but $3.2 billion penalty was imposed. Had they done this analysis, and if someone said to them that, well, you are slicing and dicing this data and selling it out to everyone out there, there is a chance that you may have to, Zuckerberg will have to sit in the Senate and answer senators' questions for 5 months. I don't think they would have gone and done what they did, right? If they knew that there would be a $3.2 billion penalty for doing something like this, plus the privacy laws, plus the stock prices went down, plus $30 billion lost in just one day. And recently they just lost how much? $70 billion in a day. Stock market, right? In front of us, everything is happening. So look, if this analysis was done and someone said, well, guys, that requirement is a high risk requirement. Let's bring some kind of experts and let's use some mathematical model. And if it's said that there's a 90% chance that you're going to lose $20 billion doing something like this, they will say, stop. Let's not even sell this data, guys. We'll think about it more. So simulations, what if scenarios, or Monte Carlo analysis tells you the probability or success. So in the exam, the question will be, well, the project team is using simulations. What are they doing? Quantitative risk assessment. What do these simulations do? They tell us the probability of success or failure, and we can make decisions slightly better, right? Another example would be, you are an investor. And someone said, well, if you invest $100,000, it will be $1 million in 3 years from now. Either you could, and as long as if you heard this, oh, it's a great investment. But if someone said the chances of this taking place is only 10%, I think you will say 90% chance of no $1 million, but there is a 90% chance that my 100,000 can become $30,000. You'll say, stop. I don't want to go in this direction. This analysis is giving you indicators which are helping you make better decisions. But it is a little expensive because you're calling experts, right? Another question about these models, one of the models is called sensitivity analysis. Sensitivity analysis, as the name suggests. And you know, sensitivity analysis is a concept. It is a concept. And someone created a model called tornado diagram. Tornado diagram. Tornado diagram. What does it do? Tornado diagram gives you a picture and shows you all your risks that are where you're performing this analysis, 3, 4, 5 risks, and tells you which risk causes the maximum impact. And it says, this risk causes the maximum impact. Let me create a better response for this risk. These, maybe I won't create a proper response, but for the top, this risk causing me such impact, I should create, right? So tornado diagrams, they show you risks based on their impact, right? Based on their impact. Higher the impact, more you need to watch out for. Sensitivity analysis. In the exam, question will be, tornado diagram is based on answer sensitivity analysis. Or the question will be a picture that is showing you highest risks, highest risk with highest impact. So you can write down this risk with highest impact. These are the risks you want to see, you want to watch out for. So these models are telling you some of those risks that you are analyzing and which risk is causing the highest impact. And accordingly, you are adjusting your responses, right? So, and the third model is called expected monetary value. Expected monetary value, or it is a concept. And the model that uses this concept is called decision tree. It's called decision tree, right? You just need to know this. Decision tree is a method of quantitative analysis, right? In your PMBOK guide, in your RMP guide, there is a picture. You need to see that picture just to identify it. Right? It tells you 50% chance of doing this, 30% chance of, so it's a picture that has been created. But from exam standpoint, 3 models for quantitative risk assessment. Simulations, also called what if scenarios, Monte Carlo analysis. Probability of success and failure helps you make better decision. Sensitivity analysis is a concept. Tornado diagram uses it. What does it show? Risk with highest impact. If the risk has highest impact, why would I? If the risk has highest impact, why would I not create a better response for that risk? It is giving me some guidance. And then expected monetary value or decision trees are other models that would be used to perform quantitative risk assessment, right? So now what we'll do is, before we go to the last part, which is responses for threats and opportunity. How do you create responses for threats and opportunities? Right? I'll take some questions. We'll take some questions. And then we'll wrap it up around 9:05, 9:10. Questions, guys? Someone had a question in the beginning itself, so I'll answer that question now.
Okay, I have that question, Hemant. It's about this risk register. I think you explained that moment you find the risk and you tag it to the objective, and then you register. So say for example, resource leaving the company, that's the risk identified, and your objective is going to add more time. It goes to the register. So my question is, when does that, like say if somebody leaves the company, which means we already identified the risk before, but somebody left the company already, so we are already in the situation to find another resource or something. Are we, is there still a, like when the trigger happened, does it become an issue at that point, or still you
So,
call it?
it's a good question. So look, risk register contains all those risks that are uncertain, which have still not taken place. If if you find out that certain risk, certain resource is floating the resume out and you have validated it, and they are giving interviews, sitting in the office, now you have identified a risk, and the resource is still not left, but there is a chance they may leave, they may not leave, but you got to protect against this risk. But if a resource, you came to the office today and you received an email from a resource, sorry, I'm just going back home because I have certain personal issue. There you go. This is not a risk, this is an issue. Risk, when it materializes, when it happens, it becomes an issue. So if something is an issue, it must go into an issue log, right? Something that has already happened should be part of the issue log. But in risk, what do we document in a risk register? We document all those conditions and uncertain events which have not taken place, and they may take place in future and may not take place, right? So we are safeguarding against them. But something that has already happened is an issue and must be immediately, in a very urgent fashion, it must be addressed. So issues based on their severity must be addressed in an urgent fashion. Okay?
Yeah, got it.
Hi, Wisdom, I have a question, please.
Go ahead.
Okay, please, what happened to the money allocated for a risk that got expired?
So if this you had sent an email, and actually I wanted to discuss in the class, but you were not there post lunch. So when a risk, wisdom, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so wisdom, when a risk has expired, the money that you had put aside for the risk, let's just call it contingency that you had put aside for the risk, is handed back over to the organization.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Any risk that expires, hand over that contingency back to the organization. But if the risk has taken place, that money is burned now. It's gone, right? If the risk has taken place, now you use that money to address that risk. If the risk has expired and it didn't take place, you hand it over to you hand that money back over to the team. Okay, all right. So
question.
yeah, go ahead.
So in risk management question, so you get question like, so you have a risk that did not occur, but there's another risk that occur that has the same monetary value like the one that did not take place. So they ask you a question: do you use the money that has the contingency that has been reserved for the other risks that didn't materialize for this new one that have materialized? So how do you answer that question? What would be the answer?
So look, first of all, anything that was not documented in the risk register, right? What is contingency? Contingency is built for risks that were known. Something that was unknown, right? Something that was unknown, and it just happened. It was not documented anywhere, but it happened. What would you do? You will not start using the contingency that you have built for other risks. Or if you feel that generally in project management in real world, you'll say, you know what, 3, 4 risks did not happen. I've got some contingency. I'm going to use it. But if this question was on the RMP exam, you'd say this is an unknown risk that has taken place, and it must be analyzed, and maybe we should seek additional contingency for that. That would be such questions are not on the exam, but that will be the possible answer based on the standard. In real life, however, you got money lying around, so for the risk that did not take place, you don't necessarily return it. You keep it, you return it at the end. When something happened, you'll say, well, I've got the contingency to cover this too. I'll cover it using the funds that I have. Okay?
Okay.
Hemant, I have a question.
Yeah.
if you do you have any example for real life, like IT project, how we can, realize the risk, for the, a small project? Because I would like to make sense, for my mind, if we have real project, like, for example, deployment the application, what kind of risk we have and how we can elaborate that one. Because I don't see, those explanation in the, course.
Human, that is a beast in itself. The question is like a beast because what happens in migration project? What kind of risk can emerge? There are remediation risks that emerge. There's so many other kind of risks that can emerge in those kind of projects. It's a beast. It's a subject in itself to discuss that. Unfortunately, out of scope for me to discuss right now, right? But Rachel was a program manager with RBC on a project where they did. Where they did a conversion and data migration. I think your best bet would be to maybe request 15 minutes with her, and she will be able to explain to you how migration takes place and what kind of risk and how do they manage risk on those projects. She will be the best expert on that, right? Because she's undertaken numerous programs with RBC. I think currently also she's managing a team there for us. She might be the right person for you. I think you should have a conversation with her about that. She will give you a really good idea on that. Okay.
Thank you.
Part of numerous conversions, data conversions, migrations, and also moving legacy applications to brand new world and brand new universe. So you might just want to speak to her about that. Okay.
Please, I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned that there's always a risk owner for every risk that is identified. If that, I just wanted to confirm that there's just one person that is assigned that task to, resolve that risk. If that person is not available, is there like a backup plan of some that can be put to place?
Absolutely, you could have a delegate for so if you have an extremely critical risk, first of all, they don't call it a risk owner, right? We call it a responsible risk owner, right? That person will be available. You choose a person like that. That's number one. Number two, those questions are not on exam for PMP, but definitely on RMP. If such a situation is there where if you find out that there is a risk which has a very high impact, you have a high exposure, I think I will always want to have an additional risk owner or a delegate, right? Delegate who will make decisions on behalf of this person who is absconding for a reason at the time of need. So I don't know how to put it, but usually when you decide a risk owner, it has to be a responsible person. But if you are dealing with risks in real world, which are extremely high impact, they will cause exposure, they will cause huge exposure to you. What would you do? I think I will have a delegate for such people, right?
Yeah, I suppose.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about responses. So responses, threats, opportunities, value destroyers, and value enhancer. And as I said in the beginning, risk management is all about creation and protection of value. Said in the beginning, right? So responses, responses is how we create and protect value. By putting the right responses is how you create and protect value. There is no other way to create and protect value except by putting responses, the right responses. So in the exam, whether you are in the risk management exam or you are in the PMP exam, at least if risk management, at least 8 to 15, PMP 6 to 8 questions from what we will discuss right now, right? So if risk is a threat, first of all, risk is a threat or opportunity. There is one common response for both, and it is called escalate. Let's just talk about that. Escalate. Project teams can manage risk at that level as long as it's within the threshold of a project team. When the project team feels that the risk is not within their threshold, they escalate it to the project manager. And project managers can resolve that risk, respond to that risk. But sometimes there will be time when, based on the governance put in place, there will be some risk that will be beyond the threshold of the project manager also, or the program manager, or the portfolio manager. Their threshold, beyond their threshold, what happens? They escalate it. Where? Upwards to the decision makers who will help develop responses, right? And what kind of risks are usually escalated? You know what kind of risks are escalated? Risks, if you're working on a project, let's say you're working on this project, and the risk that you identified on this project can impact this project also. When any risk will impact other projects or have dependencies on other projects, those risks must be immediately escalated, because now you've got to work with 3-4 other project managers, similarly programs, similarly portfolio. Any risk that impacts other external or internal components of the organization must immediately be escalated. Now look, I'm at a portfolio level. There is a risk that emerged here. I know as a portfolio manager that this is beyond my threshold. What do? I escalate it upward to my leadership. What does my leadership and team do? They develop a response. After developing a response, they give this response to me so that I can implement it when the time comes. So, analysis of risk, escalation means risk sent upwards for further analysis. Response is developed and response is handed over to that team which escalated the risk, so that they will, at the right time when the risk materializes, they will respond using this response, right? So from exam standpoint, there could be 2 questions that you will see. One of the questions would be escalation of risk or opportunity. When does that happen? You escalate risk or you escalate an opportunity when it is beyond the threshold allocated to you. What happens when you escalate it? When you escalate it, further analysis is done at the higher level. You analyze it further. And then responses are developed and they're they're again sent back down. Where? So implementation of response will happen at the level where it was escalated from. Implementation of response will happen at the level from where it was escalated, right? Further analysis, sometimes escalation leads to further analysis at the higher level. Decisions are made and those decisions are pushed downwards. Now take this action. So what is escalation? Team is saying, we don't know what to do. The leadership says, I want you to do this now, right? Here you go, we've done analysis. Here you go, $100,000, do this when this happens. If it doesn't happen, return the money back to me, right? So threats, there's a common response for both. Threats and opportunity is called escalate. When do we escalate? When it is beyond our threshold. Where do we escalate? To a higher governance level. What do? They make decisions on our behalf. What happens after they make the decision? They give you the decision. Who implements the decision? Then from the level which escalated implements the decision or implements the response, right? Okay, so let's take a look at threats. Threats. Think about your risk register. Think about this risk register. Let's go back to our risk register. Let's think about this risk register, right? So a threat, a negative risk in this risk register, for example, right, says that there is a chance you performed analysis and it says that there is a chance that you would lose $20 million due to a lawsuit. And you got a requirement as a risk, and it says if you implement this, there could be a lawsuit and you would lose about $20 million. The cost of the project is $7 million. Would you like to take that risk? Would you like to execute a project where cost of the project is 7 billion, but you are seeing maybe there is a chance I would lose $20 million due to a lawsuit, and it has happened before also. Johnson & Johnson created a powder, talcum powder, and the lawsuit was $3.2 billion. And you are also creating the same talcum powder with the same component. Would you like to do something like that?
No.
Right? No, right? So high priority risks which have extremely high negative impact. Now look, we're talking about a threat. High priority risks which have extremely high negative impact. What do? Avoid them. Get out of the path. Kill them right there. That's what I do. So in the exam, it's very simple. RMP exam, there are 15 questions on this idea. They dance around this idea. The moment you see a high priority risk with extremely high negative impact, it's a threat. You documented a risk which is a threat, not an opportunity. What would I do? I will avoid it. I'll immediately avoid it. Guys, what the heck are you doing? Kill this requirement. Take this requirement out. We are not going to deliver this requirement. We don't care which stakeholder gave this requirement. Kill it right now. It's causing me a threat which is beyond the tolerance of not this project or program, even organization. Avoid. So avoidance is a risk. Avoidance is a risk response strategy. It should be implemented for all the risks that are high impact and high probability, and where there is 100% chance of their occurrence. When something negative thing is going to happen 100%, so tomorrow is going to snow. But you know what I decide? I say, I don't really care. I'm going to drive to work tomorrow. I slip, I have an accident, right? There's a 100% chance that the roads will be bad or there will be black ice on the road, but I say I'm going to drive. What am I doing? Then taking a 100% negative risk here. There's a 100% chance of an accident taking place. Should I still be driving if I know this? What do you guys think? Would you still drive? No, right? You would not. You say, I'm not even going to go to the office tomorrow. Avoid when the chances of a risk taking place. So avoid when the chances of a negative risk or a threat or a value destroyer taking place is 100%. So look at your risk register and look at all those top 3-4 risks. See if the occurrence is 100%. Avoid them. In the exam, this is your question. 100% chance of occurrence. What would you do? Avoid them. And how do you avoid? Remove the objective completely. Remove that objective that's causing that threat. In the exam, this is the question. Project team has decided to remove the objective from the project charter. Why? Because it was a 100% threat to them. Or adjust the project management plan. Something that was supposed to happen tomorrow, I have to take the car and drive. I'll say, no, not tomorrow, after 3 days. Delay the project by 3 days. Adjust the project management plan or program management plan or a portfolio management. Adjust it a little bit, right? Remove that objective, adjust the plan, right? Now, so avoid is a risk mitigation strategy for all those high priority risks, a negative risk which have 100% chance of occurrence. And how do you deal with them? Remove that objective, kill that requirement, kill that objective, adjust the plan, right? Now, second, you're looking at your risk register. Stakeholders have given a requirement, but there is no way you can kill that requirement. You can't say, look, if I say high risk requirement, take it out. In the end, what am I left with? I'll say, oh, this project is going to deliver 0 requirements. You can't run the project. Project management is not, or program management or portfolio management, not about not doing anything, doing 0 work. No. Sometimes, so most of the requirements on your risk, most of the risks on your risk register usually get mitigated. We try to reduce the negative impact considerably. We try to reduce the negative impact considerably. Did Dave tell you about that story about buying an AK-47 rifle? Yes, no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So look, this is what it is.
Yeah.
He did, right? That
Yeah.
if there is a small little mice in your garage, you don't take out an AK-47 rifle for that. Would you buy an AK-47 rifle for a
No.
small little mice in your garage? No, right? You don't invest so much money, right? So risk management is also look at the cost and benefit analysis of things. So mitigation is a risk management strategy for your top 20, 30 risks. But what you're doing is you're trying to reduce the negative impact. So in the exam, there will be a question that you are at this time choosing a new supplier. Still, IBM was doing a project, they did a poor job. I'm trying to bring Microsoft this time. They've done great work on it, but there's a chance that they may not be able to deliver the project at the level of expectation I seek. But they are a better supplier. I'm trying to reduce that impact, negative impact, right? Change the supplier. Most importantly, in the exam, they will say, you're using less complex processes. Less complex processes is a great way of reducing risk. Reduce the negative impact, less complex processes. And you are adding more quality assurance processes. Adding more quality assurance processes to your project. What are you doing? You're trying to mitigate, reduce the impact, right? So, if the risk happens, you will implement the response. Maybe you will not be able to fully resolve it, but you will take it to the level where it's not a danger to you anymore, right? Mitigate. Mitigation is a risk management, risk response strategy for a threat where we try to reduce the negative impact as much as possible. Avoidance, 100% removal. Now, there is something called, this is the simplest, and on RMP exam for RMP folks, transfer is a negative risk response strategy where, what do? Look, we buy insurance. We still have to pay the deductible, $500, $400, but over and beyond that is paid by the insurance company. It's like sharing. It's like sharing a negative risk. Correct. So transferring means sharing the negative risk, making some burden or passing most burden to a third party by paying some premiums. So many projects, programs, and portfolios are insured. They've been insured nowadays. We're insuring them. How are we insuring them? By paying some premium. So in the exam, transfer, insurance would be the question, or project team has decided to pay premium, or they're sharing the negative risk with third party, sharing the negative risk. Transfer. And let's go back to the risk register one more time right here. What happens to these low priority risks here? This low priority risks, what happens to them? You know what I do? I tell my team, guys, what are the chance of this taking place? My team says the chance of this taking place is 1%. I said, don't worry about it. Leave it. I'm accepting that risk. I'm accepting that risk, right? Someone said, well, tomorrow is going to snow. What's the chance of snowfall? 1%. Oh, don't worry about it. We're going to drive tomorrow. 1%. I'm going to take that chance, right? So acceptance is a risk response strategy for negative risk when the probability and impact of a certain risk is extremely low. Look, my team tells me this has not happened since 1892. There has been no storm. So don't worry about buying in the data center. And I said, all right, this has not happened since 1892. What is the probability of this taking place? It's 0.001%. You know what I tell my team? Guys, don't even think about it. Don't waste your time even thinking about it. Leave alone delaying, leave alone putting some money here. I'm not going to let you think and waste your even time resources. Thought resource should not be spent on that. So low priority risks are accepted. We accept them. We say, don't worry about it. No analysis required, nothing, no priority, don't do anything. If it happens, we'll see what we need to do at that time. I'll talk about it a little bit more, maybe in 5 minutes. But right now, what kind of risks are accepted? Low priority risks, right? You accept this. Why perform additional analysis, detailed responses? Why? Just leave them. If it happens, we'll see what we need to do at that time. So, plus escalate. We said escalate, the fifth response strategy for a threat is escalate. And we say escalate is whenever something goes beyond our threshold tolerance, we escalate it. Now let's take a look at, so most of the questions on the exam revolve around negative risks. They don't so much ask about positive risks, or opportunities. When the risk is in the form of an opportunity, And if the probability of an opportunity, probability means occurrence, chances of occurrence. Probability also means chances of occurrence. If the probability is high or chance of occurrence of an opportunity, good thing is high, and if impact or means consequence, and the impact is also high, what are you waiting for? Embrace it. Embrace it, right? So if the opportunity is high, if the probability is high and impact is high, embrace the bloody thing. What are you waiting? Are you going to not take it? I will take it. So so what does that mean? Steve Jobs says in 2001, Steve Jobs says, guys, we are going to create, we'll not be a computer manufacturing company anymore. We will create a music system and we will have a portal like iTunes. People laughed at him. People laughed at him. He said, whatever. Did Steve Jobs put the worst resources towards this $20 billion project, iPod project? Sometimes what do we see in project management and portfolio management is that if a resource does not have work, they will say create a new project for this guy and put this person there, they will be busy there. But actually in real world, that's not what happens. When we start or pursue an opportunity, any opportunity, just like negative risk, where chances of taking place are extremely high and the impact is high, what do? We avoid it 100%. When opportunity is 100% occurrence, what should you do? You should put your best resources towards it. Would you not? I put my best resource towards it and make sure it's 100% happen. If someone said, if you invest $200,000 towards this project, it will become $600,000 within the next 6 months, and this is 100%. I'll say, well, I'm going to put Human on this project and I'm going to put Kemi on this project. These are my best resources and I'm going to make sure that this happens for me. So in the exam, questions are, when a risk is in the form of an opportunity, good thing, value and answer. And if the probability is high and the impact is high, the chances of it taking place 100%, put your best resources towards it and make sure that it 100% realizes. You're not going to put your worst resources. So in the exam, you're reading a question and it says opportunity, exploit it. Exploit. Response strategy of exploit. It's same as avoid. Avoid as threat, exploit as an opportunity, right? 100% chance of taking place. Put your best resources towards it. Ensure that it 100% realizes, and this is what is called exploitation of an opportunity, right? So you got to remember 100% chance of occurrence and putting the best resources, best in class resources towards it. Exploit. Second is enhance. Enhance. Make it bigger. Make it bigger. Now look, we used Agile as a pilot in one of the projects. Value delivery was 300% greater than waterfall project. The PMO said, make all projects agile, right? First, we exploited an opportunity. Someone said, if you use agile, the value will be 300% more. We put our best resources and we got this agile project to work. The department said, all these type of projects will be agile from now. We are making it even bigger, right? Making it even bigger. So enhance is a risk response strategy for an opportunity where you make the opportunity that you recently exploited, you make it even bigger. Now you're making it even bigger, right? You are adding some resources towards this. You are doing other things that you need to do to make it even bigger, right? So enhance, usually never on the exam. This is not on the exam. Exploit, PMP may see it, may not see it. RMP, 100% going to see 2-3 questions here. Now, third is share. When Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, when they built the computer, they would all they use the word from HP. Some of their friends will working in HP, and they will literally steal parts, and they build computer. Then there are a couple of friends that build a computer for us, right? Then at some point they said we can build these computers, so they went asking for funding. They had the talent, they had the idea, and someone else came with the funding, took some stock option from Apple. They had nothing but gave them Apple's stock option. Sharing of opportunity took place. Similarly, Microsoft came with an operating system, and what did they do? They talked to Toshiba, they talked to HP, they talked to us. They said, you use our operating system. We'll not create our computers for next 30 years. This was the deal. Microsoft said, we'll not create it as long as you use our operating systems. So they started paying royalty for every operating system that came in the computer, right? We all got the operating system, and this was a pact till 1998, 2000 or 2003. This pact remained. And then now you see Surface, you see all these different computers coming with Microsoft, and Microsoft is their operating system is also on some other companies except Apple. So share is, in the exam question, actually is joint venture. When someone has an idea, the other person has equity. They come together to nourish, nurture an idea. Venture capitalist and all that. What are they doing? They're sharing opportunities, right? Angel investors, venture capitalists, this is what they do. And sharing is more like transfer, guys. It's more like transfer. Share the benefits. So look, in negative threats, then the damages will be shared. Here, the benefits will be shared. If we made $1 billion, we'll give you $700 million out of that, right? Share. And finally, there is something called accept. Low priority opportunities. If they happen, that's fine. If they don't happen, they're fine. I'm not going to put my best resources. The chances of taking place is 0%. If it happens, great. If it doesn't happen, great, right? So in the exam, there could be a question not from threat or not from opportunity standpoint, but the question would be about anything that the probability of taking place is close to 0. What should you do? Accept it. But in the exam, though, there are some questions on this. Acceptance. Acceptance could be active acceptance and passive acceptance. Active acceptance is, look, the team said the chances of this taking place are 3%. The project manager said, here you go, $50 if it happens. Don't worry about it. I'm just giving you $50 if it happens. Passive, no contingency at all. 0 contingency. Because the chances of taking place are negligible. Why should I even lock anything here? Why should I lock any resource? So acceptance could be active, contingency. Passive, no contingency at all. Some contingency, but no detailed analysis. There is no detailed analysis for this active contingency. Just $50, $100. And passive, no contingency at all, right? So you could acceptance for, it could be for threat and it could be for opportunity. Active means some contingency, passive, no contingency. So for active, low priority risk, we do not want to do these detailed analysis, this, that, right? Now, the last concept is, look, risks are uncertain. They may or may not take place. You have a risk register and suddenly, just before closing of the project, the risk happened. It occurred. It took place. It realized. So responsible owner read the response and said, this is what we will do. We have already documented it. This is what we will do. Now, they implemented the risk response to address the risk. They implemented the risk response. Maybe it was avoid, maybe it was mitigate, something. They did that. Now, When they did that, what happened was that this got fixed, but the implementation damaged something else somewhere else, right? We didn't know that there would be something else. You implemented a risk response, something else went back. And this is what is called secondary risks. Sometimes when you will implement a risk response, a new risk will emerge that you did not foresee, And that is what is called secondary risk. And you will get this question on the exam. You have just implemented a risk response, and because of that risk response, this risk is you've addressed the risk, but something bad has happened somewhere. What is it called? It's a secondary risk. Anytime a risk is identified, what do? We document it in the risk register. So this secondary risk should also become part of the risk register because a new risk emerged. Then sometimes what you will do is, here you go, another risk took place. Responsible owner implemented the response. It fixed everything. So you were building the house and it rained. It was all sealed, but it started leaking. But the team has already put some money aside that just in case when we build the roof, it starts leaking, we will do this. They did that. It fixed the leak, but still some drops were coming down. So look, it worked, but it did not completely fix the problem. The response worked. Still 2% was left. This is called residual risk. So sometimes you will implement the risk, a new risk will emerge. This is called secondary risk. Sometimes you will implement a response and some negative aspects will still be left, and that's called residual risk, right? Residual risk, some leftover. It did not fully fix it. Something was still left. So risk acceptance, active, passive. Active, contingency, passive, no contingency. When you implement risk responses, sometimes because of this implementation, you'll fix something else went bad. It happens all the time in testing. They fix a patch, something else goes wrong. Secondary risk emerges, right? Because there's so many moving parts. Similarly, the time you fix something, it is fixed, but still it is not fully where it needs to be. You were expecting it to be 100%, it was only 90%. Residual risk, something was left over. Emergence of a new risk due to implementation of a response is called secondary risk. Leftover risk after implementation of a risk response is called residual risk. And this is where, guys, we will stop today.